I couldn't breathe watching them hook up my truck. The HOA called it a tow, my dad called it contempt of court. Karen smirked for 24 hours. Then a federal judge shut her down cold. "Let me take you back." The Arizona sun had barely cleared the rooftops when I stepped outside with a cooler in my hand and found a yellow notice flapping on my windshield. My truck sat in the driveway where I'd parked it the night before, ready to be loaded for our weekend trip. A heavy metal clamp hugged the front wheel, its steel teeth biting into the rim like some kind of punishment device. The paper curling in the heat read in bold red letters, "Notice of violation. Vehicle subject to tow." My stomach tightened. I'd been in this neighborhood long enough to know the HOA had rules about landscaping and mailbox colors, but this was my first taste of them turning their sights directly on me. From the corner of my eye, I caught Chloe Foster strolling down the sidewalk, clipboard tucked to her chest as though it were a badge. She didn't so much walk as glide, surveying the cul-de-sac with the kind of authority that came from being HOA chair for 8 years. Her gaze landed on my driveway and lingered too long, eyes narrowing with a satisfaction that made my skin prickle. "Mr. Whitlow," she called, her tone halfway between polite greeting and court summons, "your truck violates Section 5.2 of the covenants. No overnight parking of oversized vehicles." I placed the cooler on the ground and walked over, keeping my voice level. "It's my personal vehicle. Chloe, it hasn't moved because we're packing for a trip. You know that." She adjusted her sunglasses and tapped the clipboard. "Rules don't make exceptions for personal convenience. I've already logged the violation." Behind me, the screen door squeaked open. Tyler bounded out, phone already in hand. At 13, he had a knack for turning everything into content photos video commentary. He snapped a shot of the clamp, then zoomed in on the red stamp at the bottom of the notice. "Got it," he murmured more to himself than to me. His voice was steadier than mine felt. Chloe noticed and stiffened. "No photography is necessary. The matter is official." Tyler kept his camera steady. "That's what makes it necessary." I nearly smiled, but caught myself. I didn't want to feed the flames. Instead, I bent down and copied the violation code into my small notebook, each number pressing into the paper with deliberate force. My hand shook more than I wanted to admit. I could feel sweat collecting on my palm, smudging the ink. "Look," I said, straightening, "I'll review the bylaws myself. Until then, the truck isn't going anywhere." Chloe's perfume drifted across the dry air, sharp and floral, almost choking in the heat. She pursed her lips, the kind of expression that told me she'd rather see the clamp stay on until my truck was dragged down the street. "Very well," she replied, turning to leave. "But don't expect sympathy when the tow arrives." The clap of her sandals faded, leaving only the hum of air conditioners and the distant bark of a dog. I stood beside the truck, running my hand over the hot metal of the clamp. The steel radiated heat, branding the skin of my palm. Inside the house, the smell of sunscreen and packed sandwiches greeted me. Tyler slipped in behind me, replaying the video he'd just recorded. "Grandpa," he said, eyes bright, "they can't just tow it right, they can try," I answered, lowering myself into a chair. But trying and being allowed are two different things. I thought of the safe in my office closet. My most important possessions were their documents from my years as an insurance investigator, old family photos, and the small hardware wallet that held a piece of my retirement nest egg. It wasn't much compared to Wall Street, but it was mine. Seeing my truck threatened on my own driveway stirred something deeper than irritation. It was the sense of being cornered in a place I had chosen for peace. The day stretched on blistering hot. I busied myself with small chores, deliberately not touching the clamp. Tyler checked it every hour, noting how the sunlight glinted off the bolts as if he were cataloging evidence for a trial. His seriousness both worried and reassured me. As dusk settled, the desert sky turned orange. I poured a glass of water and tried to let my body unwind. But just as I was setting the glass on the counter, my phone buzzed with the hollow ding of a new email. From Maplewood Estates, HOA. Subject tow, enforcement. Immediate action vehicle will be removed within 24 hours unless fees are paid. The glow of the screen lit my hand, and for a long moment I stared at the words. Outside, the clamp was still locked tight, the metal now cool in the night air. I closed my phone slowly, a weight settling in my chest. The trip bags were still packed by the door, but it felt like our plans had already been hijacked. Tomorrow wasn't going to be about vacation. It was going to be about fighting for the right to stand in my own driveway. The next morning, I stepped into the garage and felt a shift I couldn't quite name. My coffee mug, always parked on the far shelf, was sitting on the wrong one, handle jutting out as if to taunt me. The broom leaned against the opposite wall. Small things, but I've spent my life noticing small things. Outside, cicadas buzzed loud enough to rattle nerves. The garage smelled of oil and hot dust. I pulled out my phone and, sure enough, a new HOA email glared at me. Subject: Notice of Violation. Extended driveway parking. Per second 5.2 of the covenant's overnight parking remains prohibited. Remove vehicle or face fines and tow. Right below the maintenance schedule listed contractors roaming our street. Pest control, irrigation, landscaping all stacked neatly across the hours Tyler and I were gone. Grandpa Tyler's voice echoed from the driveway. I joined him beside the truck. The clamp was gone. For a second I thought maybe reason had prevailed. Then I saw the faint gray bite marks on the rim where the steel had been. Someone had come back in the night, unfastened it, and slipped away. Tyler crouched and snapped photos. They want us to know they can do it any time, like flipping a switch. I nodded. We'll flip ours. From across the street, Mrs. Patterson appeared, phone lifted, like she was capturing a nature documentary. Clamp. Last night gone this morning, she narrated, inching closer. Told my sister this HOA was trouble. Thanks, Martha, I said, trying to stay civil. Her camera stayed locked on us until she retreated. I turned to Tyler. We're past trusting luck. Time to document. We headed to the hardware store and came back with a Ring doorbell and 2 stick-on cameras. I drilled the first plate into the stucco by the front door, sweat dripping into my eyes. The metallic click when the unit snapped in place felt like armor being fastened. Tyler handled the app setup, syncing each notification with the HOA's posted contractor hours. By noon, the first ping arrived. A city pickup rolled past vests, glinting clipboards in hand. They didn't stop, but the passenger glanced at our gate long enough to make my chest tighten. 15 minutes later, another ping, Mrs. Patterson dropping off lemons, staring into the lens like it was a mirror. We ate sandwiches in the garage, overhead lights off sunlight cutting a sharp rectangle across the floor. The cicadas droned on. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unmarked number reminder: access required for irrigation per schedule. No name, no signature, just assumption. Tyler leaned over. Spoof? Or someone who doesn't care if we know? At 2:16 p.m., the garage Eve camera caught him, a man in a green polo, back to the lens, standing at our side gate. No knock, no call, just a clipboard tucked under his arm. He produced a ring of keys, slipped one in the latch, and opened it like it was his own. I froze the frame. The gate swung inward. He stepped through with the calm confidence of someone on payroll. Tyler whispered, "That's not right." "No," I said. My throat had gone dry. I saved the clip twice, once to the cloud, once to a small drive I kept for claims work. Years in insurance teach you to never leave a single copy standing. The house felt smaller now, air heavier. I checked the bolts on the back door, the window latches, the garage side entry. Tyler watched me, jaw set. At 13, he suddenly looked older. Then came the knock at the front. 3 taps, pause, 2 more. Deliberate. I wiped my palms on a towel and opened the door. Emma Collins stood there, laptop hugged to her chest, eyes steady. I knew her from her morning runs, the former military spouse who waved politely but never lingered. "You're Calder," she said. Voice clipped. "You need to see what they did to me." Emma's living room felt like a command post. One lamp buzzed above a table stacked with binders, its shade throwing amber light onto rows of tabs and photocopies. She had arranged them with military neatness, edges aligned, pens in parallel. "Look at this," she said, opening her laptop. The first clip showed a man in a contractor polo slipping through the Joneses' side gate, head down, clipboard clutched to his chest. She skipped ahead, same crew, different house, same smooth pace. A third file revealed him again, turning his shoulder to the lens, posture identical. 3 houses, Emma said. Always inside the HOA's announced vendor windows. No knocks, no paperwork left. Tyler leaned so close his nose nearly brushed the screen. Same guy. Right foot drags a little. That's his tell. Emma slid a binder toward me. Its cover bore the faint outline of an old sticker rubbed off but not forgotten. Inside, HOA newsletters, vendor lists, and minutes. I stopped at a page titled Master Key Access Procedures. The margins were marked in Emma's block letters, no sign-out log. They publish the schedule, she said, tapping her finger on highlighted lines, but the keys never leave Chloe's custody. No paper trail of who takes them or when. I rubbed a thumb along the photocopy. My stomach sank at how familiar it felt. In claims work, you learn to smell absence when something is missing that should be there. Tyler, meanwhile, spread out HOA notices and began building a spreadsheet. Here, he said, matching times to Emma's clips. Crew shows up, tendered 18, 1, 07, 2, 16. Always matches a maintenance slot. Emma closed the laptop with a soft click. And Chloe, she drives to Gila River Casino, I said, remembering whispers from neighbors. More than to Sunday service. Emma's eyes met mine. Debt will make people reckless. I packed the binder under my arm, thanked her, and walked home with Tyler beside me. Dusk had settled the air buzzing with cicadas. Back in my office, I turned the safe style. The familiar clicks soothed me until the handle gave way. Inside, the shelves looked normal, my father's watch insurance files, backup drives. But the center spot where I always kept the small case with my hardware wallet was empty. For a moment, I told myself I'd misplaced it. I checked the back shelf, the little pouch I sometimes used for passports. Nothing. My pulse thumped behind my ears. On the paint near the dial, faint scratches curved like tiny crescent moons. Someone had tested the steel. Grandpa Tyler hovered in the doorway. "It's gone," I said. My voice sounded far away. He swallowed. "Ledger?" I nodded. He straightened, eyes sharp. "We've got footage. We can prove it." I wanted to believe him, but years of evidence work told me footage alone wouldn't stop people who already thought they owned our keys. Still, his determination steadied me. I took a photo of the scratch marks then of the empty shelf. My phone buzzed before I could finish. The old flip phone I kept in the drawer rattled across the desk. The screen lit gray with a new message, "Grandfather should mind his own business." I stared until the letters blurred. Then I snapped a picture of the screen with my newer phone and saved it to a secure folder. Anger wanted to surge, but I pressed it down. Evidence before emotion that had been my mantra in the field. Yet, I couldn't shake the image of Chloe at the casino clipboard and hand keys jingling in her pocket. Tyler stood straighter as if mirroring my resolve. "We build the case," he said. "Yes," I answered, sliding the binder Emma had given me onto the desk. The lamp hummed, the house held its breath, and for the first time I felt less like a retiree under siege and more like an investigator again. The community center smelled like burned coffee and floor cleaner, a mix that clung to the tongue. Folding chairs scraped the linoleum as neighbors shifted for a better view. Fluorescents buzzed overhead, a swarm you couldn't swat. Chloe stood at the front as if the podium were a stage. Shoulder-square clipboard lifted like a shield. "Order," she said, though no one had been talking. Her eyes found me. "Before we proceed, we must address resident behavior. Mr. Whitlow has been harassing contractors and spreading unfounded rumors." A few heads turned my way. A few others stayed down studying newsletters like exam sheets. I felt the room's temperature change, not hotter exactly, just closer. I kept my face neutral and folded my hands over my knee the way I used to during depositions. "Point of order," I said. "I've asked for records maintenance Windows key custody. Who signed what? That's not harassment. That's housekeeping." Chloe's smile was too quick. "Our bylaws authorize wellness checks. We're a caring community. Your tone has frightened vendors." Tyler touched my sleeve. He'd slipped into the chair beside me without my noticing a skinny shadow in a ball cap. "Grandpa," he whispered, breath barely moving, "someone's been tailing me at the library." Same man, 2 days in a row. He held the door like he knew I'd be there. The words landed under my ribs. I kept my eyes forward. "Which door?" "East side by the study rooms." He looked paler than the overhead light could account for. Chloe rifled papers theatrically. "Minutes from September." She read, and my name arrived in fat red letters on the handout's disruptive resident interference. The phrase sat there like a bruise. Across the aisle, Mrs. Patterson squinted and then looked at me with something like apology. Others didn't look at all. I raised a copy of the minutes with 2 fingers. "Who authored this language?" "The board," Chloe said. "Unanimous." "Then the board can show the log," I said. "Sign-outs for the master keys. Dates times initials." I heard my voice flatten the old professional instrument returning. Or was the key, held by chair, again? A murmur rippled mean and quick. Chloe's jaw worked. "We are not a courtroom, Mr. Whitlow." "No," I said. "We're a neighborhood, which is why accuracy matters. I didn't mention the safe. I didn't mention the tiny crescents scratched in paint or the empty space where my small case should have been. Still, the absence in my office felt present here like a vacuum tugging at the sleeves of my shirt. The discussion lurched to landscaping. People argued about palm fronds, then mailbox angles. I watched Tyler's knee bounce. He checked the door, checked the clock, checked his phone. I wanted to walk him to the car and drive him home. Lock every bolt I owned, but you don't outrun shadows by sprinting downhill. You mark them and match their pace. When the meeting adjourned, Chloe gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Please be constructive, Mr. Whitlow. We're all on the same team." "Teams keep logs," I said. Outside, dusk lifted off the parking lot in waves. The cheap coffee taste lingered. Neighbors drifted toward their cars in little pairs, conversations breaking and reforming like schools of fish. Tyler said he'd bike the short way home to clear his head. I hesitated, then nodded. 5 blocks, all lit familiar corners. I watched him push off and vanish behind a bougainvillea hedge. At home, I opened the vault again, knowing what I'd find and hating the ritual. The wheel turned, the hinge complained, the center shelf stared back bare as a polished bone. I took another photo of the scratches, forcing my hand to stay steady. Evidence before emotion. The phrase felt thinner than usual. 4:30 came and passed with no clatter of the side gate, no thump of a bike in the garage. I watered the geraniums. I forget to water when life is normal. 5 o'clock, then 5:15. Voicemail chimed. Unknown number. I pressed play. Grandfather should mind his own business. Some families need to learn when to stop asking questions. The voice was level, almost bored. No accent you could pin to a map. Air left the kitchen like a door had opened somewhere I couldn't see. I called Tyler. No answer. I called again, listening to my own recorded voice tell me to leave a message. I was halfway to calling Jake when the phone buzzed in my hand. A text, 3 dots, then words. "I'm safe. At the library, east side. You need to see this." My knees loosened with a complicated relief that didn't feel good so much as less bad. I typed, "Stay put," and inside, not outside, and I'm on my way. Then stopped myself from adding 10 more lines he didn't need. I grabbed my keys. The last of the light had gone slantwise, turning the stucco a color between peach and bruise. As I locked the front door, the fluorescent buzz from the meeting seemed to follow me into the desert dusk. I checked the Ring app as I walked to the car, new motion at the side gate, then nothing but a jitter of pixels. The cicadas had gone quiet, that eerie pause before heat releases its grip. I set the phone face down on the seat and started the engine. The library's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as printers spit out warm pages. Tyler sat at a corner table, manila folder gripped tight. His face was pale, but his voice carried steadiness that didn't match his age. "I pulled everything I could," he said, sliding the folder across. Inside were county filings, 3 refinance notices for Chloe's house, each larger than the last. Paper edges curled under my hand, still warm from the printer. Tucked behind them was a casino account summary. Gila River circled in Tyler's neat pen. "She's in over her head," he said. "Refinanced 3 times. She's burning cash at the casino. Dates line up." The hum of printers made my skin itch. I stepped into a phone alcove and dialed my father. Judge Everett answered with that gravel tone that always grounded me. "File a cease and desist," he said, after I explained. "Address it to the HOA and its chair. Certified mail copy management. Force them on record. No arguing in meetings, argue on paper. Once they violate notice, you've got teeth." I scribbled notes, hand slick with sweat. "And key custody demand logs. If they can't provide, it's negligence." His pause was heavy. "And keep that boy out of reach. Let the law, not anger, do the work." Back at the table, Tyler held up an email draft. Subject, cease and desist unauthorized access. The body listed incidents, times, and demands. Rough, but solid. I marked a few edits, trimming words to their bones. Emma's call buzzed next. "Neighbors are in," she said. "Extra cameras facing the alley and gate. One has a dash cam running on the curb. I'll sync timestamps with the vendor windows." "Good," I said. "We'll need proof layered tight." Tyler hit send, his jaw clenched. The whoosh of the email felt louder than it should. I printed a copy, the sheet sliding out hot. Signing my name in blue ink, I let the pen press deeper than necessary. "Certified at 9 a.m., I told him. On the drive home, texts pinged in, neighbors whispering about SUVs idling near the cul-de-sac, men walking past houses with maintenance badges that looked homemade. Each note felt like a bead sliding onto a wire. "I called Jake, my son. I want you nearby when we deliver the notice. No theatrics, just presence. I'll be there," he said. "We'll have a car, drift the block tonight, quiet." Evening settled. Emma texted a clip, 2 men unloading cases from a dark SUV into her yard's blind spot. The image jittered once, then cleared. Foam cutouts inside the case held black equipment squat boxes with stubby antennas. Tyler leaned over my shoulder, voice low. "That's not irrigation gear." The screen froze on one frame, the man in a green polo resting his hand on the device like it belonged. My pulse tightened. Law, not anger, I told myself. But the strap had cinched another notch. At 11:30, the house made a sound I'd never heard from it, the small, expert click of a back-door lock surrendering. Not a rattle, not a wind shift. A decision. I set my phone face up on the desk camera grid, opened the porch light flickering in the lower left window like a tired eye. In the spare room, Tyler whispered into his headset voice, thin with focus. They're moving like they rehearsed our house. A breath. 2 at the kitchen. 1 at the garage panel. The cicadas outside droned their one-note hymn. Inside, the AC coughed and held. Then a low electric hum bled into the floorboard's jammers coming online. My cell bars dropped to a single sliver. The Wi-Fi icon winked out and returned. I felt for the landline handset I'd plugged in an hour ago, that corded relic we'd dismissed until tonight. Stay put, I said. Eyes, not heroics. Copy, Tyler said, and I could picture him small and squared at the desk, headphones crooked, a pencil behind his ear like a junior dispatcher. The kitchen camera caught the first man, a green polo clipboard tucked in his elbow as if he were clocking lunch breaks. He moved in arcs, not lines, like someone trained to live between paths. Another figure ghosted past the pantry ball cap, gloved hands, then the frame jittered once and leveled. Our alarm panel blinked an unbothered green that should have been red. I hit record on every feed with a deliberate thumb, one after another, making the habit ceremonial. The cease and desist letter I'd sent hours earlier lay beside my keyboard copy stamped certified. Dates and times mattered now, like blood types. Outside, the porch bulb buzzed, gathering moths and heat. The camera over the driveway snagged a sliver of Alexis at the curb, Chloe's silhouette in the driver's seat cigarette ember brightening and dulling as she pulled. She was turned toward our house, spine stiff, watching her own plan play out or come apart. The garage entry creaked. 2 men slid through, shoulders angled to shrink themselves, and fanned out. One unspooled a cable toward the panel box. The other opened a hard case on our workbench. He lifted a matte black rectangle out of foam and set it down like a bread loaf. The sound it made, soft, dense, told me it was heavier than it looked. Audio now, Tyler breathed. Kitchen. A voice, low, and professional. Office is down the hall, left side. Not a question. I felt myself stand, though I didn't remember deciding to. The old habit of stepping between a thing and the people I love is stronger than sense. I pressed my palm flat to the doorframe and kept it there until the impulse passed. On the front lawn, a figure stepped out from Shadow Jake in uniform, the kind of quiet presence that reorders a scene. The porch light caught the badge on his chest. The moths orbited him like he borrowed their gravity. He lifted a hand, 2 fingers to his radio mic, and the comm reached the house in a wave. My ribs unlocked. The kitchen camera framed the lead man as he crossed to the hall. He hesitated, not from doubt, but to listen. A trickle of sweat ran behind my ear. I set the landline handset gently on the desk and picked up the printed letter instead, the one with my signature heavy in blue. I wanted it on my person like a shield. Notice was given. You are on record. Headlights bled across the blinds. A door thumped. Outside, someone called, not a shout, an announcement, the round tone of official language. The kitchen man froze. The one at the panel went still with his hand on a bundle of wires he didn't cut. The hum from the jammer deepened, then leveled like a plane holding altitude. On the driveway, camera Chloe's cigarette shook. Ash lengthened. She looked sideways toward the curb as another set of lights slid into view and settled. Neighbors spilled from their porches on slow feet, phones held chest high. A woman in slippers clutched a rope at her throat, eyes bright with the same mix of fear and appetite you hear at high school games. Jake walked into the frame and pressed the doorbell. The ring chimed from every speaker in the house. Police, he said evenly, and the word wore his breath like it fit there. Announce yourselves. The kitchen man pivoted for the back door, then reconsidered with a small shake of his head. The one in the garage lifted his hands, palms open, as if he'd remembered an old lesson too late. I stepped into the hall and spoke as calmly as my throat allowed, voice aimed at the ceiling, because that's where the microphones were. You've received notice of no entry. We are recording. Law enforcement is present. The next minutes moved both slow and too fast, voices instructions, the careful choreography of compliance. When Jake entered, his eyes found mine just long enough to say, "Hold your water," then slid past me to the men. Chloe hovered at the curb, cigarette a metronome. When she realized whose badge gleamed at our door, her shoulders dropped as if the porch light had flipped a switch inside her. The cigarette trembled and ash spilled down her blouse. She pinched it out with a hiss and a tiny curse we caught because the porch mic was hungry. Neighbors edged closer. Mrs. Patterson announced to no one in particular, recording as if deputizing her phone. The cul-de-sac became its own jury box. In my office, a gloved hand reached for the closet door and stopped at the edge of the frame. "We're done," someone said off camera, and the hand withdrew like a tide. Jake's voice came from the foyer, all business. "Hands visible. Turn toward me. Slow." The lines landed in the air and sat there. He radioed something that sounded like coordinates dressed as numbers. I bent to Tyler's ear. "Stay," I mouthed. He nodded, jaw working. When the movement stilled, Jake looked at me. "Do you have the letter?" I held it out. He read the header and the line addressed to HOA board and agents, then angled it toward his body camera so the date and time stamped the tape. "On record," he said for the mic, "that wasn't ours." In the garage, an officer zipped a clear evidence bag around the matte black box. Another lifted a smaller pouch from a pocket of the hard case and read the label into a recorder. In my office, a third emerged with a small familiar hard case held at arm's length, his gloved fingers gentle. "Found in closet safe." "As described?" he asked. "Yes," I said the word catching. "That's mine." He held it near his camera lens so the brand and wear marks would marry the report. Chain of custody began in the air between us like you could see it. On the curb, Chloe whispered to no one, or to herself, or to whatever God presides over people who mistake control for safety. Her shoulders made a small circle, then squared. The neighbor's breath came out as a sound, a release that wasn't quite a cheer. They guided the men toward the porch. The kitchen camera caught a last sweep of the room, quiet now, but for the cicadas and the porch bulb's tired buzz. As they were led past the bigger one, Tank, someone would call him later, turned his head just enough to find Jake's face. He said something so soft it didn't reach the microphones. I watched the blood leave my son's cheeks as if drawn by a thread. His jaw set. He glanced once toward where Tyler waited behind the half-closed door, then back at Tank, and whatever calm he'd borrowed from the badge had to be loaned again. I didn't ask what the man had said. The porch light flickered once, twice, and steadied. By morning, the news loops were already stale, the same clip of Chloe stepping out of her white Lexus wrists cuffed hair, immaculate as if dignity could be hair-sprayed. Neighbors watched from porches and pretended they weren't. Conversation skimmed fences like dragonflies. Someone muttered that they never liked the clipboard, which is what people say when they wish they'd spoken sooner. Emma texted a photo at noon, folding tables set in her backyard, paper plates stacked like poker chips. Potluck at 5. Bring ideas, not fear. The late spring air carried grill smoke the way it carries rain clues in other states. Kids chased one another between lawn chairs, laughter thin but real, like a muscle testing itself after a cast. I arrived with iced tea and a folder. Emma stood by the grill with a long-handled spatula and that calm command I'd come to trust. "Tonight is returning outrage into order," she said, flipping a burger. "We fix what made this possible." People drifted into a circle, plates in their hands, shoulders touched. The tables were lined with printed pages under paperweights, proposed bylaw amendments. Key custody protocol, open minutes, and records access. Emma had laid each packet like a map. A battery lantern glowed on the end table, waiting for dusk. Tyler rolled out a small whiteboard and wrote in big block letters, "Transparency. Custody. Notice. Paper trail." The words looked like the bones of a bridge. Emma opened with the simplest fix. "Master keys," she said. "We implement a sign-in or sign-out log, 2 signatures chair, and 1 board member time-stamped photo of the keys on return. Monthly audit by a rotating resident committee. We add a rule keys stored in a dual lock box, combinations held by separate parties." Mrs. Patterson, who had filmed everything and nothing for months, raised a hand with 2 fingers. "Who keeps the committee from becoming a clique?" "Good," Emma said, nodding. "We rotate membership every quarter, no repeats within a year. Names posted publicly. Meetings recorded." She tapped a page. "I pulled a template from Sun Lakes. They've done it for a decade." Someone near the back cleared his throat. I was quiet before he said, "Because I didn't want trouble." My wife told me quiet turned into trouble. A few neighbors nodded. Paper plates rustled like leaves. I stepped forward with my folder. "Records request process," I said, lifting a sheet. "We set deadlines. 10 business days to respond to resident requests. If denied, a written reason citing the exact bylaw section, not a shrug. Meeting minutes published within 7 days with roll call votes, not just the board decided. We require agendas posted 48 hours in advance with any executive session items clearly labeled. An older man I knew only as Bill raised an eyebrow. Won't that turn us into paper pushers? We were already pushed by paper, I said. A few smiles, the kind that warms a room. Emma flipped to the last packet. Wellness checks, she said. We redefined them. Consent required in writing. No inside access without resident present. 2 people, minimum, on every wellness check and camera on the porch for the entire conversation. We stop calling surveillance care. Tyler scribbled consent under his list and underlined it twice. We broke to eat. Smoke curled from the grill and caught the sunset light. A kid at the far end of the yard laughed too loudly, then checked himself and looked toward the adults to see if laughter was permitted again. It was. After a burger and half a cookie, I slipped inside Emma's house to wash my hands. Her bathroom smelled of lemon cleaner and rosemary soap. Normal, merciful smells. On the way back, I paused at a side table where a small pile of envelopes sat next to a ceramic bowl of keys. One envelope was stamped Certified Mail in green, the copy of my cease and desist. Seeing the receipt attached calmed some old bone in me, the one that believes in doors that lock and stamps that stick. At home, before returning for the vote, I stood in front of my safe with a toolkit and a small replacement dial. The scratches around the wheel were still there, crescent moons catching the light. I brushed filings aside, replaced the spindle, reset the combination, then added a simple, ugly bracket that made the door grind a little when it closed. Not elegant, functional. When the bolt through it made a new sound heavier, like the house had learned a word. Symbolic acts, Count Tyler said from the doorway, and I couldn't argue. Back at Emma's, we reconvened in a big, loose circle. Dusk settled, the battery lantern clicked on with a soft pop. Emma passed out paper ballots because old habits die cleaner with paper. 3 items, she said. Transparency key, custody. Consent. We filled bubbles with borrowed pens, neighbors murmuring as if the test were harder than it was. Children drifted in clusters near the fence, their play slower watchful. Across the alley, a porch light winked on and off, twice a neighbor's Morse code for "We're here." Emma and 2 volunteers counted at the picnic table, lips moving silently. She held the sheets to the lantern glow, then smoothed them into a pile. All 3 measures pass, she said. Voice steady, unanimous. The word moved through the yard like a tide. No one cheered. There was relief, and relief is quieter than victory. People shook hands in a clumsy dance we haven't practiced enough in years. Mrs. Patterson wiped at her glasses. Bill's wife put a hand on his shoulder and left it there. Committee sign-up sheets, Emma said, pointing to clipboards. First audit in 30 days. Keys moved to dual lock tomorrow at 10. Minutes in a week. We do not wait for perfect. We begin. Neighbors lined up with pens. Tyler snapped photos of the clipboard's names, dates, because paper can still get soggy. As the circle thinned, the backyard returned to ordinary. A hose left looped by the garden bed, a soccer ball under a chair, the grill lid cooling with a soft tick. Emma touched my arm. You looked taller when you fixed that safe, she said, smiling at her own joke. Taller or older, I said. Both, she said. You earned it. I drove home with the windows cracked just enough to let out the smell of burgers. The cul-de-sac looked rinsed the way streets do after a storm that never actually dropped rain. The porch light clicked on as I walked up, a small pulse of welcome. Inside, I set my phone on the counter and noticed a new message in my inbox from an address that meant nothing. No reply at post something, and a subject line that pulled the heat right out of my skin. This isn't over. I considered closing the laptop. Then I remembered that repair without vigilance is just hope with better PR. I clicked. The email opened into a grid of photos, clear, well-framed, and impossibly intimate. Tyler at the kitchen table doing algebra, his pencil midair. Jake in civilian clothes laughing at something I'd said, his face unguarded. Me asleep on the couch, mouth slack, the blanket ridden up to my ribs. The angles were wrong for windows. They were angles you only get from inside a room close to breath and ordinary mess. For a moment, the house felt hollowed. The screen's cold glow lit my hands. Tyler's door down the hall was closed, a thin slab of painted wood that suddenly felt like a dike. I scrolled because I had to. At the bottom, a line, "Keep your keys shiny." Some doors open both ways. No signature, no typos. Someone who took time. I forwarded the email to Emma and to the address Jake uses for work, then took a photo of the screen with my old phone the way you do when you know evidence sometimes lives longer in analog. The porch light buzzed once and steadied. In the quiet, I could hear children somewhere on the next street squealing over a late game of tag, their laughter threading through the block like wire. The community center filled the way a church does on a holiday quietly with people pretending they hadn't hurried. Folding chairs squeaked in tight rows. The air held that familiar blend of floor cleaner and bitter coffee thin as if someone had stretched a pot too far. On the dais under the fluorescent wash, a small, clear evidence bag rested on the podium like a votive. The ledger sat inside scuffed case, catching the light. I tried not to stare at it the way a man stares at water after a long walk. Emma called us to order with the soft rap of a gavel that had seen better meetings. Neighbors hushed. Phones slid face down onto laps. The legal representative from the management company stood at the edge of the platform with his binder closed as if proximity to statements might stain. Tonight, Emma said, we acknowledge what happened and we correct our course. No grand words, just a line drawn. She invited the legal rep forward. He cleared his throat, unfolded a paper, and began to read, not with flourish but with the careful diction of someone who knows each syllable matters. On behalf of the Chandler Oaks Homeowners Association, we apologize for failures in oversight record-keeping and key custody protocols. We acknowledge unauthorized entries during posted maintenance windows, inaccurate meeting minutes, and misuse of wellness checks that breached residents' trust. Paper rustled when he turned the page. The sound carried like wind through dry leaves. A low murmur moved the room, shame and relief braided together. He continued, we accept responsibility for harm caused and we commit to the reforms adopted by residents. Transparent minutes, sign-in and out procedures for master keys, dual custody consent, rules for checks, and open records within stated deadlines. He signed the statement, pen-tapping once against the podium click, then placed it flat. Emma lifted the gavel again, glancing out at faces I now knew better than I ever expected. Bill and his wife, Mrs. Patterson, with her new committee lanyard, the kid from down the block who'd been too loud at the potluck and now sat straight-backed as if attending civics. We will follow our bylaws as amended, she said. We will publish minutes on schedule. We will audit keys monthly. No theatrics, just promises with dates. She looked to me, and I stood because she'd asked me to. I kept my hands on the back of the chair in front of me, feeling its metal warm from someone else's shoulders. My father taught me that paper can protect people when it's read out loud, I said. Tonight is about paper, but it's also about something you can't file, how we look one another in the eye at the mailbox. Soft laughter kind ran along the rows. We got here because we trusted systems without checking their hinges. We leave here checking them. Emma nodded, and the legal rep stepped back to the podium. He lifted the evidence bag by its edge and held it so the room could see. The plastic crinkled. Light flashed off the case where Tyler had once traced a fingerprint with curiosity. Pursuant to the court's release and chain of custody complete, he said, we return Mr. Whitlow's property. He unsealed the bag slowly, the way you open something that's meant to be witnessed. The room quieted to a held breath. He set the case on the podium, stepped aside, and gestured. I walked up with knees that remembered a younger man's stride, and for a moment the room narrowed to the rectangle of scuffed plastic and the dull shine of its hinge screws. I didn't make a speech. I lifted my hand and rested my fingers on the case. The plastic felt room temperature, no glow, no drama, just my property coming home. When I picked it up, the weight settled into my palm like a book I'd lost and found. I nodded to the rep, then to Emma, and turned so the rows could see without needing to lean. Someone, maybe Mrs. Patterson, let out a small, involuntary yes. Applause began in a single pair of hands and built uneven but persistent like rain starting on a roof. It was not triumphant. It was grateful. I caught Tyler's eye in the second row. He lifted his chin half an inch and grinned the way 13-year-olds grin when they're trying not to. Jake, in civilian clothes, stood against the side wall, arms crossed, face softer than it had been in months. He didn't need to be the uniform tonight. Emma tapped the gavel once to calm the room and moved us on as if returning a ledger were a normal agenda item. Nominations, she said, and the first hand went up. There was no drama to the votes. Emma elected board president with a show of hands so obvious that paper would have been redundant. Names filled the other seats with minimal fuss. When someone nominated me for a title, I didn't want Emma saved me. We need Calder on contract, she said. Community security consultant. He knows how to build a paper fence. The legal rep smiled as if relieved to file something he understood. The board voted, and for the first time in my life I accepted a job without asking about salary. The pay would be measured in quieter nights. We moved to public comment. A woman with a stroller thanked Tyler for saving my laptop and probably my sanity. Bill admitted into the microphone that he had read the minutes the way a man reads the instructions after the table is already wobbly, which got the laugh it deserved. People confessed small cowardices and promised small braveries. Each promise sounded like a hinge being oiled. Chloe's name hovered, but never landed. She was not there. Her absence had its own shape, a negative space we all understood. Reputation sometimes disappears the way water does in Arizona, fast, with no puddles left to point at. The apology, the reforms, the returning of property. These were the puddles we'd made instead. Emma closed the meeting with the line my father would have approved. Let the minutes reflect. She struck the table with the gavel. The sound was a wood-on-wood knock that made the room exhale. The collective sigh surprised me, not dramatic, just the sound of people letting go of a held note. Chairs scraped, paper rustled. The coffee urn hissed out its last bitter breath. Neighbors drifted toward me, not for autographs but for handshakes. Fingers that had pointed or scrolled now squeezed. Outside, the lot felt harmless in the early 2024 light, cool for once, of breeze-moving trash cans like big gray chess pieces. My truck sat along the curb where I'd left it, no clamp, no sticker tires, chalk-free and honest. The paint had the clean sheen of a thing left alone. Across the way, Bill touched the brim of his cap. Mrs. Patterson gave the smallest nod, her phone at her side for once. Tyler jogged ahead, tossed his backpack into the bed, then thought better and brought it inside. I put the ledger case on the passenger seat and rested my hand on it for a heartbeat. The neighborhood sounded like sprinklers and birds. Nothing cinematic, that was the point. We do not live in endings. We live in maintenance. On the drive home, I checked the mirrors, the way habit makes you check a stovetop, not because you expect a flame, but because knowing is calmer than guessing. A single email notification glowed on my phone face down in the cup holder, an echo from the world that never sleeps. I ignored it. Not a cliff, just a gentle reminder that peace is a practice, not a verdict. The porch light came on as we turned in. It buzzed once and steadied. When the chairs finally stopped scraping, the room smelled of burnt coffee and floor wax. Outside, the night air felt cooler, almost forgiving. The ledger sat back in my hands at last, weight familiar, resting secure in a safe, with a new lock that closed with a heavier sound than before. Justice, I've learned, doesn't arrive with fanfare. It shows up in signed pages, steady votes, and neighbors brave enough to speak. For anyone tangled in HOA red tape, know this patience, law, and community can still turn the tide. What lessons has your own neighborhood taught you about standing together?